Uh, Good evening, everyone. I am Giancarlo Guerrero, Music Director of the Nashville Symphony, and it gives me a great honor and privilege to welcome the fabulous composer, Joan Tower. How are you, Joan?
Oh, I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing fine, and you look good, and I can see that you're staying healthy, and I hope everybody in your household is doing okay.
Well, for my age group, we're doing okay. I'm 82 and I'm 93, so my hair is starting to change color.
Listen, how do you like my hair? It's becoming epic.
You need a haircut, I think.
Listen, I hear that every day, and there's not enough of hair product that can keep it down. And I am right now in the hall in here in Nashville in our beautiful concert hall. I
Oh,
needed to get out of the house, but yeah, this is just like all day of being here. So, I guess it does come with the maestro hair, so I'll take it.
it's good for the younger generation, you know.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad not only to see you, but more importantly to know that you're doing well. By the way, I'm assuming you're taking advantage of this time at home and composing and catching up on projects.
Oh yeah, I'm composing up a storm, and and I'm also learning some dead composers. I used to play the piano a lot, and I sort of gave that up for composing after a while. I mean, it got smaller, and
Mhm.
now I'm playing all those dead composers and loving it. Actually,
Some of them are pretty good, aren't they?
they are actually. I hate to admit it, not bad.
Do you have a favorite? Like, since we're on the topic, do you have like a favorite, somebody that like really touches you and speaks to you?
Yeah, I think you might have heard of him. His name is Beethoven.
Oh, he's okay. Yeah, yeah,
The
he's
reason I love him is because actually I learned a lot from him when I was playing his music when I was younger about architecture and what I call a motivated architecture. He really knows how to pull a line
mhm.
and make a huge architecture that's strong and motivated. Uh, and along that structure, he's taking risks all the time.
Mhm.
And that's what I love about him. And that's what I learned from him. Actually, I have him, unfortunately, up here. You see that?
It's a nice reminder.
Yeah, I like to take him down every once in a while, but
It can be a little bit intimidating, isn't it?
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
listen, everybody who's ever wanted to write a symphony, you have to have that guy over, looking over your shoulder.
Well, we write differently nowadays, but I think he's a very strong composer for for what he does and how he does it. But I love Bach and I love Chopin and I love Debussy. Those are the composers I'm working on right now,
Wow,
actually.
you have some good taste. I'm impressed.
It's
Well,
a range. It's a range.
well, listen, you can't avoid. That's why I fell in love with classical music. All those names that you mentioned. That's the reason that originally I was drawn into this beautiful art form.
Were you a violinist or a pianist?
Percussionist.
Percussion. How on earth did you get involved with those dead guys?
Listen, oh, you know what? Hanging out with my buddies growing up in Costa Rica at the Youth Symphony, we would listen to radio broadcasts and stuff, and we would go like, "Shut up! Here comes the bassoon solo. Shut up! Here comes the trombone. Here comes." So and he's, "Oh, here comes the triangle solo." So that's and I still get the goosebumps in the same place. That's what I love about it. I don't care how many operas and how many stories and how many symphonies. I still get the goosebumps. I hear at that particular moment in a Chopin, mazurka, that particular moment in an aria of a Strauss opera, it still gets to me. I don't care,
Yeah.
or like the beginning of Traviata. You root for Violetta that she will live happily ever after, but then you hear those opening chords in the second violins, and you say, "Oh man, this is not going to end well."
Yeah. Yeah,
But you're still rooting for them.
totally agree. I totally agree.
So, but
It's
yeah, I came from the back of the orchestra with two sticks. I'm in the front with one stick. Boom, there you go.
but you know what? My favorite people in the orchestra are percussionists. And the reason is because it's pretty clear to me why. They're very first of all, they're the first people that come up to me in a rehearsal. And they say, look, I want you to hear these sticks. Do you like these sticks? And what about this size cymbal? Do you think it's good enough? They immediately get creative with me as a composer, you know, whereas some of the others are like the path is very wide around me.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
But
No,
there's
I
a
agree. Percussionists were a special breed, you know, and I tell people all the time that I do miss playing. I have to be honest. The older I'm getting, I miss that camaraderie of being part of an ensemble, you know, and as percussionists, we were used to sharing instrument and sharing mallets. And of course, always trying to please, you know, composers. And come on, the 20th and 21st century, our century, that's the century that you guys pushed percussion into such a
That's
different
true. That's true.
stratosphere
Exploded.
that, oh, completely. And we always welcome the challenge. And so that, to me, I have to say that's what I miss, because conducting is such a lonely profession, you know?
Yeah, it's a great, but it's, you know, there's another reason that they're very flexible because they have to be.
Yeah.
When they walk into a piece by anybody, basically, they have to know, okay, what sticks are they using? What instruments are they playing, as opposed to their comrades? So there's mobility in the back. There's a tremendous amount of flexibility.
And
So,
we have we have the best conductor jokes too.
you do? Oh,
Yeah.
I want to hear those
Because
sometime.
we were watching. Oh man, we're able to catch everything. We have more time watching what the conductors are doing. Oh man, we can be brutal and we can come up very quickly with the whole pattern.
Let's do a side zoom with that one, okay? Because
Well, we should do that
more
one.
jokes. I've got some. I need more.
Oh, for sure. I'll gladly share them with you. So listen, I wanted to start. You were born in New Rochelle, New York, but you moved to Bolivia when you were 9 years old. Where in Bolivia, by the way, did you move?
La Paz.
Okay, so you went to the capital, and y algo que me gusta es que tú y yo hablamos español.
Sí, pero mis palabras son muy despacio ahora.
Hablas perfecto. So I just wanted to, you know, brag that, my God, you speak Spanish better than I do.
No.
But when you moved to Bolivia, had you started your musical training?
Yes, I started piano when I was 6, and I had
Okay.
a
But
teacher.
listen, moving to Bolivia at, you know, at that early stage, I mean, finding music training in Bolivia must have been challenging to begin with. Even probably finding a piano. How did that go?
Well, see, my father was very musical. He was a mining engineer and got a job running the mines in Bolivia. But he knew I was musical. His mother was a pianist, and he also had a lot of music in him. And so he found me a piano and a piano teacher who was actually very good. She was German. I called her the witch on the hill. She was very tough.
Weren't they all? I mean, there's a different generation. I remember my teachers; they were tough. I can show you the scars.
Yeah. So that was good. And then wherever I went to find a piano and a piano teacher for me, because we did travel a lot.
So. How did you deal with the altitude in La Paz?
Well, I was 9 years old. I adjusted pretty fast, and I learned Spanish in 3 months because it was survival time. And I had a good ear, so I picked it up fast.
Now, you said you came from a musical family. So did you listen to classical music growing up?
Yeah, well, my father sang and played the mandolin and the violin all badly. And we had these little musicales at dinner, but it was mostly popular music of the 20s and 30s, you know. But I loved those times to be with the family with music, and I replaced my mother at the piano as soon as I could.
Now, when you went to the university, did you study music formally? You studied composition, correct?
Well, I got back here when I was 17, and I was thrown into a prep school, which I hated. But yeah, and then I started composing when I was 18 at Bennington College, where I went, which was opened up a whole new doors for me. Yeah. So
did you start composing around that age, around 18, 17 years old?
18.
Wow.
Because they had a class that asked me to write a piece. I had never been asked before. I was playing a lot of piano at that time. And so I said, okay, I'll write a piece. It was a disaster. I mean, it was a total disaster. When I heard it, I was like, wow, that's really bad. I got to do better.
Was this for piano solo?
I do better for the last 60 years.
Was this for piano solo?
No, actually, I think the first one was a trio, which was way beyond my capacities, you know, at that time.
You
then I wrote a piece in the style of bolero because I had no way of shaping pieces. So I figured, well, I'll just start with single instrument and just keep multiplying instruments. That was also a disaster. And
Now, did you have any particular teachers that influenced you, like that you remember fondly, that had a positive impact on you?
you know, I don't think you can really teach composition. It's not like teaching an instrument. It's way too complicated. But you can have people who are good traffic cops who can guide you in certain areas, with certain expertise. I studied with a lot of people, and they were great. Some of them were really interesting people, couldn't teach. Others were not so interesting people who could teach. But there were a lot of them, and but I can't say that any one of them influenced me. I was basically self-taught.
I feel kind of the same way about conducting. It's something that is very difficult to teach. You either have it or you don't. And a lot of it is just like you said, learning from catastrophes and hopefully getting better by it.
That's right. You learn from catastrophes. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, do you listen to any music outside of classical music? Is there any particular style that attracts you?
Well, see, my music is a compilation of music because of the music of Latin America, the Inca music. I was dancing with that, playing percussion around the Inca, because I had a nanny who went to these festivals and I would follow her. So that rhythmic bass it came from South America, actually, and the dancing, because I love to dance. So it's a very physical kind of rhythmic thing that music is about for me. But then jazz pianist later, and I got to hear all the jazz greats in New York, which was a huge education. I was Thelonious Monk, Bill Evans, all of them. I heard them live. I mean, it was an amazing treasure land, And so music has a kind of a jazz harmonic base to it, although it's not obvious. And the Latin thing is not obvious either, because the dead composers really took over. I guess I'm coming from the European tradition quite strongly because of all the piano music I played and chamber music. But there's that other stuff is in there. The Latin rhythm and the jazz harmonies are in there too.
Well, I have to say that one of the things that I greatly admire about you, amongst many things, is the fact that, unlike many of your colleagues, you actually had a successful career as a pianist. And you were one of the founding members of the very prestigious Da Capo Chamber Players. And that's kind of unusual. I mean, I'm sure that kind of also helped in your composition process.
Oh, yeah, because I think, you have to be on the other side of the page as a musician. I think as a player, you need to compose in order to understand how that page is made. Or as an orchestra player, you should be a conductor to know how the conductor is working to get the results he is. I think music is complicated, and you need to get around it as much as you can to see what the other person is doing. I took up conducting because I was so fascinated with the conductors I'd worked with. I couldn't understand why some got results and some didn't. So I took up conducting. I'm a do-it-yourself type, and I learned a lot just from doing it. Like, oh, is that what he's after? Kind of thing. Yeah.
So you did go into the dark side of conducting, huh?
Well, I didn't have the time. It takes time. You really have to know the score. And after a while, I was conducting Prokofiev's third piano concerto.
Wow, I'm impressed.
I learned the orchestra part very well, but I didn't learn the piano part. I'll figure. That's fine. He knew this piece cold. I mean, it was a disaster because he was rubatoing all over the place, and I couldn't hear it because it was so dense. So after that, I said, you know what? Maybe I better just conduct my own music.
Very good. Well, something about the Da Capo Chamber Players is that, I understand that it started 50 years ago in 1970, and you guys commissioned over 100 works. I mean, it's quite, the catalog of the works and the composers is quite remarkable. I tell the people that are listening, they should definitely research further because it is a very prestigious group. And I mean, are any particular of the projects that stand out for you? I mean, in terms of compositions or people that you collaborated with?
I've dealt with so many players, such fantastic players that that's my family. I've written 11 concertos and 6-string quartets. I've been all over the map, but I've worked with such great players. And the bottom line is that you've got to give them something to care about. If you don't give them something that resonates with them, it's not going to go anywhere. It's just going to go on the shelf. And I know that as a player, I played a lot of composers that I got right away and I loved, and I played a lot of composers I didn't get at all. I didn't know what they were doing. So I understand that from a player's point of view. So the goal is to give them something that they care about.
Is the group still going on, by the way?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're still going. They're in the 50th anniversary, and they're up here in residence at Bard, where I teach. And they play my students' works and other student composers here. No, it's a long time relationship, but that was my best education, playing piano with them.
Well, in 1985, you became the first woman to become composer in residence of a major symphony orchestra. In this case, the St. Louis Symphony, with our good friend Leonard Slatkin, who was the music director. And we've come a long way, I think, recognizing female composer, but we still have ways to go. But back in 1985, I mean, that was still a very new thing, correct? I mean, having a female composer in residence.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it took a long time. It started, John Duffy started the Meet the Composer in Residence. He puts composers in residence with 10 major orchestras. And that was a huge turning point, because we were not played by orchestras at that time. I mean, very few living composers were played by orchestras. And so that opened up some doors that were quite significant at that time.
I also have to mention that, around that same time, Leonard Slatkin had also hired Catherine Comey as assistant conductor. And also that opened the door for female conductors, which even in this day and age is somewhat of something very exotic. I mean, it is changing, but we've definitely come a long way.
And also the orchestra's membership has come a long ways. Because when I was coming up, they were mostly male membership in the orchestra. Now it can be 50% or more.
Except for the harp player, of course.
Oh, yeah. Yes, the harp player, yes.
That was usually the one female guy in the orchestra, which was unusual. Now, you have been teaching at Bard College in New York for many years. Do you have like a technique, a composition teaching technique? I mean, how do you shape them? How do you avoid influencing them with your styles? Because it must be a difficult thing.
I don't think you can teach composition, as I said before, but I think what you can do is set up a hearing situation, because I think that hearing your music gives you the most information about what you're doing. Because once you hear what you're doing or not doing, it's like major information, rather than me telling them you're doing this or not doing that. I mean, I can be there kind of as a guide, but because of my experience, but basically I set up a hearing situation. So the Takabul people play their music very well, and they get to hear what they're not doing. And we also have a lot of conservatory players who are really good, and they play it. And we do a Music Alive program with other composers who come, like they hear. So I'm just trying to surround them with other ideas and professional and non-professional players. And that's the best education I can help give them.
Well, you have a special relationship with the Nashville Symphony, because before I became music director of the orchestra, Leonard Slatkin was the music advisor, and the orchestra won its first set of Grammys with a recording of some of your works. And if we remember correctly, it was a sweep. I mean, that CD won Best Orchestral Performance, Best Classical Album, and Best Contemporary Composition. And of course, you already had a relationship with Leonard from your days as composer in residence in St. Louis. And now we're going to listen to an excerpt from one of those pieces, which is the piece called Tambor, which means drum in Spanish. Can you tell us about that piece?
Well, can I just say one thing about Nashville? I opened the Schermerhorn Hall because we did a pre-concert, a pre-season concert. So that I said, look, I don't want to go into a recording without a performance. I don't like doing that. I think the orchestra really has to kind of live with the pieces a little bit, share them, and then we'll go into recording. And I really was insistent on that. So they created a pre-season concert, which was for the construction workers and the donors and the patrons of anybody who was involved with making that hall work. And there were 2,000 people there. And I was like, oh, we were all like, oh, this is going to be a challenge, because it was all my music. You know, it wasn't Beethoven or anybody else. It was just me. And we were all, the orchestra, Leonard, me, we were all expecting this to be a challenge. Well, it turned out to be an unbelievably positive experience. There was a standing ovation of 10 minutes, I think. And this roofer, a guy who worked on the roof, came up to me at the barbecue and he said, you know, I got to tell you, Miss Town, I was coming to that prepared to go to sleep because I was dog tired. I was very tired. But your music wouldn't let me sleep.
The best compliment.
That was a huge compliment.
And we have a picture here in the hall somewhere. I remember they called that the hard hat tour of all you guys wearing hard.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
I mean,
and I had to tell that story because you know what it was. It taught me that the most of the people in that audience were country folk music, but they didn't know anything about any classical music, basic orchestra, even, you know, nothing. They were completely innocent of what they were hearing, and somehow it reached them. That was a huge. We were all like in shock, like, oh my God, they actually liked this. I can't believe it, you know. So that was a very interesting experience.
So this little excerpt we're going to listen is from Tambor. Can you talk about that piece?
Okay, Tambor features the percussion section, and they have 3 roles. One is to eye-line the orchestra, meaning to support it. So there's a little tempo block behind the trumpets, or there's a little hi-hat behind the strings. What it does is it focuses the rhythm of that line without interfering with it. So that eye lining. Then the second one is counterpointing. So they're doing something different from the orchestra, challenging what the orchestra is doing. And the third thing is they solo. They have their own space, totally. And I still love this piece. I'm very critical of my own music, but I love this piece.
Well, let's listen to one of Joan's favorite pieces, is Nashville Symphony playing Tambor. that was a fantastic piece of music. And now fast forward a few years later, and I was honored to champion several of your works. And I recorded another CD dedicated to your music with the Nashville Symphony. And if you remember, we actually did a crowdfunding project to help sponsor this recording. And remember, we got generous people that from all walks of life that actually donated money to make this recording possible, which was a way to make this project a reality.
That was great. Yes. And I love coming back to Nashville. I always love that place and the orchestra too. Yeah.
We're very proud of here. So
and
now,
Alan
yeah, well, now we're going to listen to an excerpt from your violin concerto. And this one we had the great Cho-Liang Ling as soloist. But this particular moment that we're going to listen, it's actually a moment that showcases our Nashville Symphony concertmaster, Jun Iwasaki, because you wrote a cadenza for 2 violins. And there's a reason or why you wanted to have these dueling instruments at this particular moment.
I wrote the piece for Elmar Oliveira, and his brother and he used to play together a lot. And he told me they would fight, but they loved each other. So in this duet, there's a feeling of love and kind of working together. And then there's this, like they used to, what do you call it? When 2 boys rumble.
Rivalry.
There's a lot of rumbling that goes on.
Well, let's listen to this wonderful excerpt from the violin concerto with the Nashville Symphony and Cho-Liang Ling and Jun Iwasaki playing the second part. the last excerpt we're going to listen from that recording is from a piece that you titled Stroke. And I know that this one has a very special personal meaning for you.
My brother had a major stroke, and I took care of him for 11 years. He was in 5 different facilities, and it was quite an experience. And so I decided I was going to dedicate this piece to him. And it was commissioned by the Pittsburgh Symphony, and Manfred Honeck, a wonderful conductor, did a great job with this. And they actually FaceTimed the piece to my brother in a nursing home, so he could see it and hear it. It was an amazing experience. So it's basically it's about the heart and the beat, which changes. It can be very slow and heavy, and it can be very fast, and maybe agitated, maybe not. It could be both, but the repetition of the beat is the heartbeat in that piece. That's one profile. The second one, there are 5 solos that not doing that kind of rhythm at all, basically, but they're kind of doing melodic curves up and down, and sometimes very freely. So that's so it's horn, bassoon, trumpet, violin, and clarinet. Those are scattered throughout the piece.
Well, let's listen to an excerpt from this wonderful piece, Stroke. Well, Joan, it's so great to see you, and more importantly, to see that you're doing well, and know that I miss you, and I hope that we'll get a chance to see each other very soon after all of this crisis is over.
I hope so too, and much luck with everything. I know it's really tough now for orchestras. That's a very tough ball game for you guys. So start.
I will do it. When I do it, you'll be the dedicatee of that piece. I promise you. Okay.
You write it for me, a solo piano piece in whole notes.
There you go. That may be my minimalistic approach to the piece. Okay.
Okay.
So it's great to see you, Joan. Be
Good to see you.
safe, and I will see you again very
All right.
soon. Okay.
Ciao,
Take care.
ciao. Ciao, ciao. Bye.